Hi there, welcome to Conversations, where we seek to advance your leader and team excellence by discussing relevant topics that impact today's organizations. Welcome to the show. Hey there, leader. In today's conversation, I have the opportunity to speak with Dr. Anthony Perdue about leading with emotional intelligence during a crisis. I'm your host, Dr. Kelly Whalen. Dr. Anthony Perdue is a doctor of strategic leadership, as well as an executive and leadership coach, trainer, teacher, speaker, and consultant. Dr. Perdue is also one of my amazing team members at Belem Leaders. Dr. Perdue is a certified professional coach. He is certified as an emotional intelligence coach and a professor in organizational leadership. Dr. Perdue helps leaders clarify and execute their purpose for greater meaning, trust, and engagement. He helps develop leadership skills for enhanced personal and organizational effectiveness and increases emotional intelligence for improved self-awareness, relationships, teams, and culture. For all you Clifton Strengths enthusiasts, Dr. Perdue leads with strategic individualization, relator, learner, and ideation. Dr. Perdue, welcome to the show. Dr. Perdue, how are you today?
I am doing well, Dr. Whalen. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's nice and sunny here in Florida today.
I see you're rubbing it in off the bat. It's not nice and sunny here in Maryland.
I'm sorry to hear that. Well,
But
your
the
days
sun's
are coming.
that they are. That they are.
Oh, well, thank you so much just for taking the time out of your busy day, to come on the show and talk about leadership and emotional intelligence. And, as we just move deeper into this COVID-19 crisis, leaders everywhere are just demonstrating their capacity to lead. And the funny thing is, or the interesting thing is, that the capacity may or may not be resembling what I call leadership excellence. So I would love, just to hear your thinking around leadership and its importance, especially during a crisis.
Yeah, wow. So leadership, obviously, and we both know this, is extremely important during downtimes. So when things are just kind of status quo, having a vision, having goals, being able to inspire others towards that goal as a definition of leadership is extremely important. Where two things stand out to me, though, in a crisis. Number one is, as a leader, how do you show up? Who is your real self? And in a crisis, when things are flying at you, we tend to become ourselves. So our character comes through, right? So that's kind of number one. So if you haven't been kind of strengthening those character muscles, your ethics, your values and things of that nature aren't there, it really shows up in a crisis. And the second thing is, problem solving. Do you fight, flight, or freeze? Do you have that amygdala hijack? And that's where that emotional intelligence comes in. And do you really calmly solve problems? Because you got to still have that vision. What are things going to look like on the other side? But what things do we need to do? What problems do we need to solve right now to make it through to the other side?
Yeah, so important, that authenticity, right off the bat. And I really think that organizations really need to be having their eyes open right now, because are your shining stars, the ones who you have, kind of tagged shining star as a leader, are they living up to that? Are they, handling that problem solving in a way that you're suggesting that leaders should be, handling problems during a crisis? And so I really think taking a look around, even if it's in the, the remote space, how are your leaders showing up, right?
Yeah, that's huge. And it's interesting because you're taking me back to the days of studying about leadership, where we talk about trait theory and things of that nature. How are you perceived, and perhaps how you look? And so when the rubber meets the road, when in a crisis, it's not all about necessarily your traits or your skills, but it really comes down to that authenticity and who you really are as a leader And so one of the ways that people are finding that out is obviously in real time, but a way to prepare for this is really to assess leaders. You know, there are assessments out there that we can administer, and there are different ways about going ways to go about finding the true character of a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're certified in emotional intelligence, which is amazing. So why don't you give our listeners an idea about first what emotional intelligence is?
Sure, sure. So emotional intelligence is a set of emotional and social skills that really determine how we both understand ourselves and express ourselves, as well as how we relate to others, our ability to develop and maintain relationships. It's also our ability to remain calm under
Mm.
stressful situations. And then lastly, it's our decision making. It's how do we take all this emotional information and really synthesize it to become more effective and to really help with successful outcomes.
Yeah, that's great information there. And that sounds like the link to leadership. So how
Mhm.
is or why is emotional intelligence so important for leaders?
Well, so let me first say that studies have shown that emotional intelligence, so there's been this long debate about IQ, right? And then there's
Hmm.
EQ. And then the question is, well, how can folks that drop out of high school, right, who were like F students, go on to create, computers and personal computers and just literally change the world? Well, it's their emotional intelligence. So for a leader in as far as emotional intelligence, to be able to understand, to self-actualize, which is part of self-perception. What are my goals? What do I really want out of life? That's a key component of emotional intelligence. And then how do I, as a leader, show up in specific activities, or specific times when I interface with people? Am I a bull in the china shop? Am I unable to get along with folks? So emotional intelligence is so important when it comes to self-leadership, knowing what you want out of life and knowing how to guide yourself, as well as our ability to lead others.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you're talking about IQ and emotional intelligence, you need more than business acumen to be a great leader. Sounds like there's all these
That is,
other facets of leadership that go hand in hand, which I
yes.
think is good news. Like you said, not everybody, goes to school, is educated in the way that, we typically define that. But still, people are talented. They do, dig deep into themselves and are able to uh, articulate their authentic self, whatever that looks like, to the world.
Mm, that's right. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so when we think about, let's just think about the times now, because these definitely are just challenging times. So, what part, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, what part does emotional intelligence play in leading during times like these?
Wow. I think the main thing is self-awareness. So during times like these, there's this term called, well, I'll use two terms. One is FUDS, fear, uncertainties, and doubts. So
Mm,
all this stuff is coming at us. That's very scary. Most of us, no matter what age we are, have not gone through a global pandemic where we have to stay in the house, where our very lives are in danger, and where we are challenged to put food on the table and have to work from home if we're fortunate, right? So
yes.
emotional intelligence, our ability to be self-aware of our own emotions. So if you're a leader and you're on a conference call, and let's say you're thinking about it, the TV's on, right? And they're showing the mounting infections and deaths, and all of a sudden you become fearful. How does that translate into your leadership? So one of the first things about emotional intelligence, which is in fact foundational, is self-awareness,
Mm.
emotional self-awareness. How do I feel right now? And how does that translate into the way that I'm expressing myself to those that I lead, whether it be family, or in a work environment. So that would be number one, self-awareness. I could talk about this all day long, so I'll try to prioritize one other one. I think really it's around stress management. So in the leaders that I've coached more recently, they may feel and appear on the outside that things are well, but once you kind of unfold or peel back the onion a bit, the level of stress is pretty high because of the change, that leaders have had to undergo, where kids are running in and out of rooms, and there's little delineation between your work day and your kind of personal or family day. You couldn't go to the gym like you used to every morning at 6 in order to blow off some steam, or when you got off of work. So things have changed, and stress tolerance has become a challenge. And that's a facet of emotional intelligence that we deal with it as well.
Yeah, the total dynamic that you're painting, that picture there of being home, and if you do have children in the home, and what does that look like? How are you still leading your organization, your team, yourself, with all these extra things that are going on in our homes? And you're right, where is that line between our work and our personal life when we're in a crisis like this, and then what are we doing about that? So
Yeah.
that's some good
Yeah.
stuff there. Yes. Yeah, it is challenging. It is
Yeah.
challenging. And how we show up. And like you
Yeah.
said in the beginning, we're going to show up with who we are during a crisis, our real self.
That's right. That's right.
And so are we proud of that real self as we're going through these challenges?
That's right. And I commented earlier about my real self today. I feel like having a Duke sweatshirt on, go Duke,
Go
because I missed
Duke.
the Final Four, which, in the national championship. So being able to balance that, being able to be your authentic self, but still show up
Oh,
as a leader in the things that we have to do is definitely a challenge. Yeah.
yeah. And I think leaders need to, give themselves permission to show up as their best self. And even though we are in a crisis, even though we are experiencing, the uncertainty, what did you say? Fear, uncertainty, and doubts, FUDS.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fudding going on, FUDS going on.
A lot of funny. That's right.
And so really giving yourself permission to look at who you're showing up as, and then is that the person that you want to be, I guess, displaying to the world? Because whether it's to your family or to your team, to your organization, we're still showing up, and really, how are we communicating that? And I imagine emotional intelligence is also has to do with body language. Does that also kind of feed into understanding others?
Absolutely. So body language, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, is they've said, I think, upwards of 80% of how we communicate, right? So sometimes you could, they say it's written all over your face, right? Think of,
Mm-hmm.
of emoticons, emojis, right? Where you don't have to really say anything, even as a leader, but people will know, and especially if someone in your household will know exactly what you're feeling and thinking. As a leader, it's important to understand this for ourselves. So when certain emotions are triggered, whether it be anger, whether it be fear, worry, etc., anxiety, is our bodies a lot of times tell us what's going on. Whether it be our heart's pounding, it's going a little fast, or whether we start to sweat, or whether our neck or shoulders get tight. So our bodies will really tell us where we are, and a lot of times, a good leader will pay attention to that and understand the trigger of that, and then be able to look backwards to mitigate or get to the root cause of why they feel that way, and how to improve upon that feeling, to mitigate those FUDs, right? To not make FUDs your leader, in fact, but that you lead, or you have you confront and have confidence over that which you may be challenged with.
Yeah. And that's such a great demonstration of leading by example.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How do we want to lead our people? What do they want? Who as a leader are you showing up to be? And then what are you displaying to your people? Because
Yeah,
we want our people to be safe and secure. We don't want them to have that fear, to have that uncertainty,
yeah.
or doubt. And so if we're showing up as a leader, and yes, sometimes we need to do things afraid, but I think the brain understand whatever the brain is told to do, we are going to exhibit.
Mm, yeah. And it's funny, you mentioned earlier our best selves, and there was this term in the good old Greek days called arete. And arete was, the question was, how do I live my best life, become my best self? And arete was the highest expression of your best self through your virtues and values. In other words, your
Mm.
character, right? So as you aspire to be your best self in an environment of crisis, showing up with authenticity, oftentimes it's just putting our values and character on the front stage so that we align with what those things are on the backstage, so that we're a real person no matter where we are, where we show up.
Right.
And sometimes that can be challenging, especially in work environments where the culture, there's this big vulnerability movement with Brene Brown, and being vulnerable, and it's a good thing. But some work cultures are challenged with being vulnerable. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you align your values, your best self, with your emotions to be vulnerable? Also, given that work culture can be a challenge for leaders as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when I think about that and, emotional intelligence playing with other aspects, like you said, how you're showing up as a leader, your personality, development opportunities, all those things, I think hinge on how we show up as a leader.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So, what might be some practical tips for leaders around emotional intelligence? Say they're just tuning in for, the first time. Maybe they've heard about emotional intelligence, maybe they haven't. What would
Mm-hmm.
you like to say? What do you want to speak to around emotional intelligence for leaders?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is, number one, just get educated, and if you're not very familiar with emotional intelligence, just spend some time getting educated around it. Daniel Goleman wrote a great book around emotional intelligence. There's several books on emotional intelligence Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is another one that was written. And those are um, books that are consumable, I would say, in a business context. Um, the other thing I would say is really to understand your own strengths of emotions, or your own level of emotional intelligence. And the best, or one of the best that I've seen, and the tool I'm certified in, is the Multi Health Systems EQI, or Emotional Quotient um, 2.0. Again, that 2.0 thing is, I guess we're in 2020. 2.0 assessment. And I think that's something that it will help you to understand how you perceive yourself, how you express yourself and show up to others, how you deal with your interpersonal relationships, your level of empathy, your level of social responsibility, your level of stress tolerance, your level of decision making, problem solving, and even well being. So it's a very information rich assessment that leaders can take to really understand themselves as well. So I would say
Yeah.
those two main things is to get started and grounded in emotional intelligence.
Now, would you suggest that leaders can use this assessment that you're certified in as a 360?
Absolutely. In fact, that is so now we're talking about again, emotional intelligence is a piece of leadership, right? It's a huge piece, but with a 360, you're now giving the assessment to those around you, to people lead you, to your peers, and to those that you lead. And the more alignment there's a term called objective self-awareness. And that term is used for how closely are you to those that perceive you. And that's one of the ways to really understand and say, hey, I am very aware of who I am and how I show up as a leader. So I would encourage not just the assessment with their leader, but if they have a chance to do the 360 assessment, I think that is one of the best ways to create self-awareness, and especially in emotional intelligence all the way around. I think that's extremely, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, I remember the first time that I approached a leader about taking a 360, and and right off the bat, he's like, "Oh no, that's good. That's good for them, his people,
Yeah.
but not good for me." And so, through coaching, I really needed to, uh, help that leader understand that a 360 should not be feared. It should be something that leaders are accepting of, and that we want to learn, how other people are viewing us, and what we're speaking to them, whether it's, through our body language, or through the activities that we're doing as leaders. And so I'm always encouraging leaders to go ahead and take a 360, be enlightened, because that's the only way that we're going to um, be able to uh, really heighten our leadership,
Yeah.
by really having that spotlight on us, and then being able to say, I went through a 360, this is what I learned about myself because other people were involved in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gives you so much self-awareness. And it's funny you mentioned that sometimes, in your experience, the person was a little bit, uh, apprehensive about the 360. And that's actually very, very normal from the top down. So there was a study given a few years ago that said self-awareness was the number one challenge among CEOs. In fact, in coaching, I think it was like 75% of respondents felt that way. The second, even in my coaching now, with director levels and some C-level, that's still always the challenge, because the first thing they want to do in terms of leadership is focus on their team, other folks, right? It's rarely themselves. And so a smart leader, a leader that understands that self-leadership is the foundation of being able to lead others, to lead teams, to lead the business function, and even strategic leadership at the C level. Those are the leaders that really understand and really get it.
Yeah, so important to get it.
To get it.
Yes. And that leader that I was talking about, afterwards, he kind of saw the light. He was encouraged by the comments, and exactly, uh, you know, what was established through that 360. And he was able to really provide himself with development opportunity through that 360 to advance his leadership.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting. There's in the Toyota model. So if you think about Lean Six Sigma and some of the things that they've done around operational excellence and continuous improvement, they believe in this sense that a leader is never accomplished. There's always more to learn. That the ability to self-reflect and to grow is the first duty of a leader, no matter how high they attain or what position or status they attain. So that's something I think is definitely applicable when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to leadership overall in our country. I think that we as leaders, the leaders that take that same thought process of self-development along the way, in a crisis or not, is always welcome.
Yes. So true. So true. Well, Dr. Perdue, I want to just, thank you for the time that we had with you and, just sharing your expertise around leadership and emotional intelligence. And I'd love to be able to connect people with you. And, yes, you're on the Belem Leaders website, but I know that you have your own as well. So I'd love for you to tell our audience how they can connect with you and learn about more about what you're doing.
Sure, sure. Well, if they want to start with Belem Leaders, that's fine with me. But I'm actually at, you can catch me on the web, the internet, at www.anthonyperdue.com, and that's Perdue with an E, Perdue. And also, you can email me if you want to take an assessment, or just Anthony at compasslg.com. That's COMPASSLG.com. And then also on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Anthony Perdue, as well as Twitter, as well as Instagram.
Right. So you can catch him everywhere. That's
Catch
awesome.
me if you can.
That's right. And there is a free download, correct? On is it anthonyperdue.com there? The 7
Yes,
keys?
yes. How to lead like a lion, the 7 keys to the kingdom. So if you go on the website, just put in your email address. I promise I won't spam you. And you can download the ebook. It's a foundational book for leaders to really, a lot of stuff we talked about today, but to really kind of look inward and look at that self-leadership development, or self-development, as we've talked about.
Yes. All right. Well, you heard it here, folks. All right. Well, thank you again, Dr. Perdue. Stay safe, you and your family. And I hope to have you on the show again, and we can expand this conversation around leadership and emotional intelligence and coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from this conversation, there's a lot we can talk about. But I appreciate you having me on, and be blessed.
Okay, you too. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.